Green Bay is a small town, only 100,000 people. Those 100,000 people may be different in many ways, but there's one thing that brings them all together: the Green Bay Packers. In Titletown, the blue-collar city only knows hard work, tailgating, championships, but more importantly, they know family.
We have a saying in this town: faith, family, and the Green Bay Packers are all that you need. Sanjay and I grew up in Green Bay. You could say that we are Green Bay, or even better, the voices of Green Bay. We bring a local feel of Packer fandom to a worldwide audience.
Friendship, family, and football.
Ladies and gentlemen,
this is the Freezer Podcast.
What is up? We are back. This is the Freezer Podcast, where we bring you local field Packer fandom to a worldwide audience. I'm Sanjay, and alongside me, like always, is the OG, Matt.
OG.
No Fred today. Fred is on vacation, enjoying his time on an island far, far away with his family. Well, actually, just the wife. Kids are at home. But we'll see if he comes back all tan and everything from the sun, but he's enjoying himself. I hope he's having a good vacation. And you guys got to wrap things up with Fred and Matt last time. I obviously was not here. I was at work, but so I'll just do a little wrap up at the end of the show too for the season. But I wanted to get out some breakdowns of grades today, and as well, because we actually have a lot of interesting, I guess, endeavors in the next couple, hopefully, days. Actually, I mean, it could be as soon as this week that we find out our new defensive coordinator, because obviously, as you know, they did not retain Joe Barry. They didn't retain him on your show, correct?
No, we had not. It happened the day after.
Kind of breaking news for us as well. So obviously this was, kind of anticipated, right? We already kind of knew that this was probably the route we were going to lead, but you were a little nervous because, you have the really good performance against the Bears and the Vikings, and then obviously the Cowboys, and then in the Niners, you really did actually play pretty well on defense. So you never know with Matt LaFleur's loyalty, but I think the regular season was pretty telling. And, I think Matt and I, we've gone over this how many times, how many games you probably could have won based on just defensive, improvement, or just the fact of being just at least average, not even being dog crap. And there's a lot that could be said too, that Jordan Love lost a couple games, just with interceptions and stuff. But either way, that's just how the season played out. So yeah, that we'll talk about some candidates that we kind of see as potentially, big name hires. And obviously that there's already been 5 guys confirmed. I have them listed here too, so we'll get into that later. But there was some football. It wasn't us, unfortunately. It could have been us in Detroit in the NFC Championship game, but it remained in San Francisco. And we'll talk about the first game, and that was the Chiefs and the Ravens. And Matt, I don't know what your thought is about Lamar Jackson and this Ravens team, because I mean I had them winning, just because I just thought their defense would be marginally better than the Chiefs offense, but the Chiefs offense obviously this whole playoffs has been playing pretty well. But your thoughts at least about the Ravens as a whole?
Well, if you want me to say good things about him, I am not a Lamar guy.
Really?
I recognize his talent. I think he's obviously super talented, and he's a one of one. He's like a Michael Vick type to me, but I don't think his game translates to the playoffs. In the proofs in the pudding, they shit the bed every single time they get in the playoffs. And really, had they not gotten paired against kind of an upstart Houston Texans team who wasn't necessarily a juggernaut, you could argue they would have dropped their first game. So,
right.
But what I did see was that, and this is maybe not on Lamar, but they deviated from what got them to be a 1 seed. They got away from the run game, and they started passing the ball left and right, and they neglected their running. I think I saw that 8 running back calls. That was it for a whole game. And it wasn't like they were getting stomped. It wasn't like the game got away from them, where they got to throw to catch up. It was within reach most of the time. and they had a drive going until late, and then Lamar threw that really boneheaded interception into like triple coverage in the back of the end zone. So, I never really buy into the Ravens hype. Like the whole year, it's like, well, the Ravens are flying under the radar. I'm like, well, they're flying under the radar because they shit their pants in the playoffs, and that's exactly what they did again. So let me know when they make
they were, right?
Let me know. Let me know when he makes a Super Bowl, and then my ears will perk up. But until then, like I just don't care.
Yeah, it's just a weird story with that. And I remember someone read a stat like Gus Edwards had like a 15-yard run, and then he never saw another carry until the second half. Like it's just wild to me that you have this offense that has gotten you this far, and I think maybe just the elevation of Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, and then you get back Mark Andrews. You think you need to throw all over it because you think you have all these weapons, OBJ. But it's just like, no, go back to your roots. And I think that's what's kind of made Matt LaFleur a better coach this season, is that he really did stick with that, 50% run, 50% pass. Like, as much as it's been fun watching all these, young wide receivers and seeing like who LaFleur throws to, if it's tight ends or them, he knows that the game goes through Aaron Jones. And like, I think that's really, and I don't know, was it Todd Monken is the offense coordinator? Yeah, so they got a lot of questions to kind of ask and like look in the mirror kind of moment, because I don't know if they're going to be, I for one did not think Lamar Jackson was the MVP. I thought maybe
I don't either.
In all honesty, I think Christian McCaffrey could have probably gotten a nod. I think CeeDee Lamb.
Well, they're going to give it to Lamar because he ran the ball. But if you're going to give it to someone that ran the ball all over the place, give it to Christian McCaffrey, who
Josh Allen, regardless of what you think, he had the most touchdowns. But it's just like, I don't know. It's a tough one. But and then the Chiefs, right? Like, they just know how to win. It doesn't matter their rotation. They doesn't matter their the depth chart. It's kind of mind-boggling. You got to just tip your cap, right?
Well, you do. And I was having a conversation with a guy at work today, and I was saying when Brady and Belichick were in their height and they were doing everything in the AFC, like, even in their off years, like when you're, this is not going to be a year the Patriots are going to make the Super Bowl, make the playoffs, but they're not going to go on a run. And then they go on a run and they win the Super Bowl. Like, they just always were the team. They knew how to win. They had it down. As they say, the cream rises to the top. I think the Chiefs have entered that territory now. I think, like,
1,000%.
It's like even in their off year, which was this year, where they never looked dominant at any point during the season. Well, they get to the playoffs and they went 3 for 3, and
they lost to the Raiders.
Yeah, now they're in the Super Bowl. So
on Christmas.
So it feels a lot like, get used to seeing the Chiefs in and around the Super Bowl for the next 10 years, because I don't think they're going anywhere, particularly as long as Mahomes is there, and for sure as long as Andy Reid is calling plays with him. I just feel like they know how to win, and like you said, they're just going to be a staple. And you got to respect their operation, man, because as impressive as what the Packers did with really little to know, perceived talent that wide receiver, we all know that's not the case. They're doing the same thing in Kansas City. They got Rashee Rice, and you got like MVS, who'll give you 3 to 4 games a year.
God, what a moment for him, right?
Kadarius, he's gonna get 2 Super Bowl rings, which is just it just blows my mind. He's got at least one.
Yeah, more rings than Rodgers, right? Isn't that nuts?
There's something not right about that. So good for him, I guess.
And you know what really makes me think, especially with like kind of going back to your comment about like it, when the cream rises to the top, like, you just know, like, hey, regardless of what happens, they're going to be there. Can you just like look back of the what ifs of just like, if Rodgers just had a marginal defense or a competent special teams, and like all those NFC championship games that we've been in, and like, yeah, did he play like dog crap against the 49ers? Yes. But like, I just truly believe like all those games that just like Kaepernick ran on you, and like, Eli goes and throws on, like, it's, you ever just wonder, like, at least could have just been to some more Super Bowls? I don't know about win them, but like at least been to so many more. Well, that's the fuck. That's the crazy part.
The Chiefs are basically on the arc that we all thought the Packers were going to be
right.
on. Like they would go to 3 or 4 or 5 Super Bowls, win a couple of them, whatever. you're right though. It's like to not ever cash in on 2014 against the Seahawks. You go 15-1, you lose a game against the 9-7 Giants. You don't
You
squeak
got the
one
Falcons,
through.
you got the 49ers
It's
twice,
like
the
not one
Buccaneers.
of those you didn't luck into it. Like
And,
just terrible.
and it makes me feel bad for Rodgers because like the guy should be in Canton a lot.
Yeah.
I mean he's going to be in Canton regardless, but like
Sure.
he should be there with the Brady's and the Montanas and stuff.
And they're
of just
already
having
doing it
those
now.
rings.
Yeah, when they talk about GOATs, like they don't even mention Rodgers anymore. It's just Mahomes, Brady, Manning, Montana.
It
Like
is
that's what
wild.
they're
I
gonna
mean
do.
it. You know what? That those conversations are always fun, but like in the end, we know what quarterback we had, and he's arguably the greatest thrower we've ever seen. So I think that debate is always going to be there. But whatever. So Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So that's the AFC representative. NFC. What a wild, I guess, finish for the 49ers. A team that's definitely showing a blueprint that you can have. You can have your way with them. You just need to close it out. You got to play 60 minutes because that's what the Lions didn't do. Great story for the Lions in this season. I mean, as much as I don't like the Lions and they're a division foe, and I hate the Vikings and the Bears more than I hate the Lions. So I think it's as much as it was kind of weird to hear, Dan Campbell come in and kind of take over the team, and you're just kind of like, this guy's going to probably flame out as a joke, in a couple years. Well, 2 years later, 3 years later, sorry, he's in, knocking on the Super Bowl, on the doors to get to the Super Bowl. So
Yep.
you got to give the guy a tip of the cap, and obviously, huge news for them today, keeping Ben Johnson. I don't know if this team is the same moving into next year if he's gone, based on just the fact that Dan Campbell was kind of the detriment to this team, honestly. Like if you think about it, a lot of the gutsy play calls and the going for it on fourth and things, it's like, yes, that's been your identity all year, but like against the good teams, you've never been good. You did it against us and it failed. You did it against the 49ers, it failed. And you did it again against the Cowboys, it failed. Like it's just like constantly you put yourself in, like, are you just doing this for the sake of, like, I'm Dan Campbell, I'm the guy that doesn't risk, or I'm always going to risk everything for nothing, like, are you just trying to keep your name that way, or are you just that stupid? Because the good coaches don't put their teams in those situations. I get it that some teams, like, do you think Sean Payton ever looks back at the the onside kick that he had against the Colts, or guys take chances, right? But like,
Yeah.
I think when you do it like strategically, and you don't do it so often that teams are just expecting it, like that to me is like a kind of the big question for him. But go on.
Yeah, I struggle with this one because most of the season, like, I was comfortable with the Lions doing what they were doing. Like, they've really been just a non-factor in my life, or in a sports sense, as a Packer fan forever and ever. And to see them kind of come up and play well this year, it was like, okay, cool, good for them. But honestly, as the season wore on, and for sure when we hit the playoffs, like, they got a little bit cocky. I thought the fans got a little lost their humbleness to them and were a little bit too, out in front with their comments. So, you and I were talking before the show, it's like, I was referencing a tweet I had put up, like, the Lions just can't wake from a slumber after 30 years and just find themselves in a Super Bowl. Like, you got to go through,
you got to
go through the doldrums, man. And so, they got their heart ripped out in a sense that we're very familiar with. But you know what? I was very impressed with them in the first half. I mean, they punched them right in the mouth. The Niners, right away, as the Packers did. They got the ball, went right down the field. We took 7 minutes off the clock. They took like a minute because they scored so fast, like 4 or 5 plays. But you got to finish, man, and that's the whole thing. And you want to look at Dan Campbell, and I understand, like, part of the reason they got to where they got is that they were aggressive and they stayed true to their nature. But honestly, when the quote, to quote, what's his name? He's nuts from Minnesota. This ain't Detroit, man. It's a Super Bowl. only it was Detroit this time. It's like, right, you got to kick that field goal and tie the game up and level it out a little bit. And lo and behold, there's a 3-point game that cost them in the end. So I wonder if Dan Campbell will look at that situation a little bit different. It's one thing when you do it, in the regular season, right, or whatever, but when you can taste the Super Bowl after a great first half and you let it slip a little bit, I think at that point you got to swallow your pride and let it go, what's best for the right now? And that's to take the point. So I think he'll be regretting that for a while.
I don't remember in the NFC Championship game against the Bears if we did anything like that. I know it was such a weird back and forth game. I know that defensive, with Urlacher and all those guys, that it was a battle on that field. I know that, but like, I just don't remember like Mike McCarthy going for anything crazy. Like I don't really remember Mike McCarthy going for anything crazy in the first place. I think we were always begging him, either do the coon, 4th and 1. Like how many times were we always just like, why don't we go for it more? Like we always like.
Well,
I felt
remember
like we were
that.
conservative.
Remember our version of this game was the 2014 collapse, and if you remember in that
Yeah.
game against the Seahawks, it was the reverse. McCarthy took 2 field goals on like the 3-yard line, instead of going for
Yes.
one of those and trying to get, so it's like it obviously is situational, but in that moment, it's like I just think that it called for the field goal.
So the 49ers, they make it. Brock Purdy has the drive, has that big run, really solidified himself, taking that next step, taking their team to the Super Bowl. I mean, I've never understood the whole Brock Purdy's not good quarterback kind of thing. I don't think he's like in the top 5 of quarterbacks in the NFL. I do think he's a top 20. Like, hey, look, this guy with all pros all around him can look really good, and he made the right plays at the right time. He used his legs at the right time. He did throw a lot of costly, interception kind of balls that either if they did make it, they did, or, in our case or the Lions case where they don't intercept the ball, there are those cases that, you sometimes just get lucky breaks. That's the NFL. But Brock Purdy, I do think it's it's a good story. Obviously, Mr. Irrelevant goes to the Super Bowl, and he has a chance to win the Super Bowl. I don't know. Obviously, it's never happened. So, I think it's good for them, and for the 49ers, it's the rematch, right? It's the rematch of what is it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. 4 years ago.
Yes, thank you. So we'll see if they can overcome their demons, because right now it's really the Chiefs and nobody else, honestly. Like I get that they may not have the sexiest roster like the 49ers or some of these other teams like the Ravens, but it doesn't matter in the end. It's can you play ball, and can you do it for 60 minutes, and can you overcome adversity of being on the road or in the cold or whatever it is. And they just seem to show it every single year, and that's why they're in this dance a lot of the time. So should be a fun game next week, and I hope you guys all enjoy the Super Bowl, because it's still the Super Bowl, regardless if it's not your team in there. It's still the biggest sports spectacle of the year. You'd be stupid not to watch it, right? Like you can't tell me you're not going to like tune in on a little bit on a Sunday when you have nothing better to do at 5 o'clock.
It's appointment TV. Come on now.
Right. So, that's basically the NFC, AFC championship games, and obviously good football. And lost my bet, so it doesn't really matter. So,
you picking the Chiefs in the Super Bowl?
I had Baltimore and 49ers, but I had the 49ers at the spread, but that didn't count anyway, so it didn't cover. But yeah, Chiefs. Maybe I should stop betting against the Chiefs, honestly.
Man.
All right, so. We'll do some roster the grades real quick, because it will make this real simple, and then we'll close things out with the show with the coaching candidates. But I want to let's just start maybe bottom to the top, maybe, and we'll start. Someone said it right at the beginning of the show about Anders Carlson. Let's talk special teams. Let's talk kicking, place holding, and long snapping. Your thoughts? Matt, I'll let you start off with this one, because I have a weird, like, I got this weird loyalty to Anders that I don't know why. I really don't know why. Maybe it's because he's like a brother of a guy that's all pro, and he's just a kid, he's a rookie, but I don't know why I have it. Go ahead.
Well, I really struggle with Anders Carlson, because on one hand, I completely understand why the Packers moved on from Mason Crosby, and there's going to be growing pains with a young kicker, and like you got to give him more than a year. Like, and the thing was, it was the right year to do it. It was a year that really we had no expectations. I know we went to the NFC divisional round, but it's like we didn't think that was going to be happening, and I don't think the Packers themselves thought that was happening. So, and in that sense, like I totally understand it, but obviously it didn't come without frustration. Like there was several games where we missed kicks. Obviously, the biggest one being the 49er game. So, I'm as pissed off as I was at that game. Like I'm fine with him coming back next year, but I do think that they need to bring in some type of
which they already did
to push him, which is good. So like no longer it's free reign, like buddy, you got to start making it now. And the hard part is he makes the easy ones, and he hit some long ones, but that like mid range is like that's where your money's made. And if you can't hit those, I don't think he'll be on such a long leash in year 2. I think he could be on a little bit shorter for one. But special teams as a whole, like if we're gonna put like a grade, like an A, B, C,
Yeah, we can
D,
just do a grade on the whole team.
I'm gonna go C. Like I just think they were average. Like I mean, like I don't like Honors wasn't. I don't think he was as bad as people make him out to be. His percentages weren't god awful. They were pretty average. I think that I hate that he doesn't kick the ball out of the back of the end zone every time. I think he's told not to do that. The holding was iffy a little bit. Like Nixon, obviously, like he's great, but I'd like to see him maybe a little less times take it from 100 yards, 8 yards deep in the end zone. Coverage teams, blew some things here. So I just think they were middle of the road. I know that I think they graded out like PFF, bottom third, but yeah, give me a C for that unit.
Yeah, and honestly, the I don't know what I just lost my thing here. The holding and the snaps, I do think there was a lot of them that were like questionable, and was that Matt's issue or Zach, or was it Daniel Whelan's issue of like not holding it properly? Like I think that's kind of collectively as like a whole, like as an issue. I'm going with a D. As cool as as much as I was loyal to him, I have to be critical, and I have to just say like, look, they're all rookies, so like that's the one thing that I guess I don't know about Dan Whelan. I don't know if he's technically a rookie or not, but I would think he is. So like, oh sorry, Matt Orzek is not a rookie, but Dan Whelan is.
Yep.
So I don't know if it was just based on rookies and just got to give them a pass and just be like, look, hopefully they get to a C or a C plus or maybe even a B minus at best for next year. But I hope Jack Podlesny or Podlesny. Well, we'll see what it. He's a Georgia kicker, so he clearly has kicked some big games. And maybe he can bring in some I guess a challenge for Anders, obviously in training camp, and we'll see what happens. Come August. Let's move on.
Isn't that guy from is he an SEC kicker? He kicked down south.
I just said, yeah, Georgia.
You did, okay, Georgia, and Anders came from where?
Auburn. So he's still SEC.
So why aren't we drafting dudes that kick outdoors in the cold? That's what I'd be looking at. Like Mason Crosby kicked that Colorado, man. Come on.
Yeah. Right. Maybe shoot an email real quick to Brian.
Yeah, I should.
So let's talk about the safeties. So you got Rudy Ford, you got
Owens,
Jonathan Owens, Anthony Johnson Jr., Benny Sapp III, and obviously Darnell Savage is the big name. So this group, I'm still giving it like a C minus or a D plus. I get that Savage had the huge pick six, but then he ends up botching a really big pick six that he could have had against the San Francisco 49ers. That to me already drops their grade. Jonathan Owens was a nice story. I feel like he really got carried by his wife. He had the one freaking big moment in the Lions game, which was kind of like scoop and score. Great. I mean, I would hope any of the guys on the field could have done the same thing he did. Obviously, it was a heads up play, so fine. I'll give him that. Anthony Johnson Jr. was a nice, overall, surprise. I think maybe he's very raw, right? So I think maybe like another year or two, and maybe he could, be a good backup. I still think they need to go and get their guy in the draft or even through free agency. And I already talked about Savage, but like Rudy Ford was injured for most of the year. So, it kind of hurt him that he couldn't be out there more, but yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty low on this grade for the safeties.
Yeah, I think a C minus is pretty. It sounds pretty right. I mean, to quote the late Denny Green, they are who we thought they were. It was just a bunch of guys. Like that's kind of what the safety position was, and they played like that. Like they had some games where they made some plays. They had other games where they were just completely looked like they had no idea what they were doing. Like Jonathan Ford or Owens. He had some nice plays. Yeah, I think he ended up being better than I thought he was going to be. But none of these guys made me think, well, they don't need to look at safety early and often in the draft. I think that's quite the opposite. I think that they could do nothing but improve there. In fact, that'd be one of probably the 2 or 3 positions I would look at adding whether it's a draft, a trade, anything. That's what they got to do there. So a C minus sounds pretty spot on.
And that's really what I question the most. If I know there's a lot of talk about Brian Gutekunst's GM of the year, and I rightfully so, but I think this was the biggest miss in that you completely just said, yeah, nah, we're not going to address this at all, other than Anthony Johnson Jr. like in the 6th round or whatever spot you got him at, and you just let Amos walk, which I totally understand because of his
Yeah.
salary, but like you just didn't even like, go forth with that. Like you said, oh, we're gonna bring Jonathan Owens. He had a lot of good snaps on the Texans. So he had, that team was always on defense. So yeah, that's why he looked so good. They were so
Yeah.
dog crap that's why he had so many snaps. But like that to me was just my one regret or my biggest disappointment, I guess, with Brian Gutekunst. That just was that was, I don't know, disappointing that he just
They felt
completely
like
overlooked that position.
they punted on that position.
Yeah.
They knew that they had no money. We're gonna have to get by with scraps, and that's exactly what they tried to do.
And I don't know, Nick, I find it. I kind of want to just see where their path is with this young like mentality. I know like sometimes you do need to bring a couple vets in just to kind of get that like leadership and maybe that like, we've been there kind of mentality in the locker room. So you never know. I mean, maybe he can come back on the cheap because we still don't have a lot of money. Next year is the big year that we're going to have that like buku bucks kind of moment. So we'll see.
25,
Honestly, we'll talk about free agents obviously in a month, but cornerback, Jair, the Valentine experiment, and obviously made of glass, Eric Stokes, and we have I think that's everybody, right? That I mentioned, and Keyshawn Nixon. Sorry, and Keyshawn Nixon. So, man, I want to give this group a C plus B minus, and I think it probably could be a B because of how good the Valentine action was for the duration of Jair being gone. They held their own for the most part, and I think we could have been blown out in a lot of aspects, but we never really were, other than the Lions game on that Thursday night, which was a short week anyway. But Keyshawn Nixon had his ups and downs. Like that Giants game was really rough. The 49ers game was rough. Like it, when he's your third corner, it's not the worst situation, but I don't know how you feel about, actually, I do know how you feel about our boy Eric Stokes, but he's like the deciding factor for this group, right? If he can come back, which he tried coming back and then he just got himself injured again, but if he can come back, then that kind of makes you think like, do you need to address this in the offseason? Because you don't know what's going on with Jair. I think he's coming back. Like he's way too expensive to just like move on from. But that's where I'm going with the grade. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I want to go with a B minus. Like I feel like
I some ways
in some ways you could say a C plus, a B, or even an incomplete. Like going into the regular season, remember it was going to be, or at least we started training camp, but we were talking about, oh my God, like it's Jair, it's Stokes, it's Rasul, it's they got 3 deep, and then they got to have Nixon at 4 and 5. It's like they're looking good, but they trade Rasul before the trade deadline. Jair misses half the season. Stokes basically didn't play at all, and so you went through the season with the Allentines, at the corners. And I thought that they actually held their own pretty well. I mean, and I don't know that it's going to prevent them from trying to address that position, in the offseason, but I think that it gives them a little bit of reassurance. Like, well, if Stokes doesn't come back 100%, at least we have Valentine who can definitely start opposite of Jair. So I feel like a B minus is a pretty complimentary grade for him, considering all the challenges they faced. And the pass defense was never, at least cornerback wise, was never like the reason why they were losing games. Like they had a couple bad games, but like I felt like they played pretty well.
All right. So we'll move real quickly with these linebackers, like the inside linebacker. I only want to say this is that I think you can definitely see that age caught up to Devontae. I do think he had those first 2 years, really the big first year here, and then he got that contract, and it's kind of like, okay, I don't know if he is worth bringing back. He is got some cap issues as well, with his contract. But Quay Walker, Big step, honestly. Didn't get himself in trouble with games, no bad penalties. When in the game, he was everywhere. The guy was flying around. I think they need to blitz him more. He's
Yeah.
he's too big of an athlete to not have affect the game more. And in all honesty, I think Isaiah McDuffie has to get a little bit more of a sniff during the offseason and training camp. Sorry, where like, look, when he was on the field, the guy actually he's flying around just as much as Quay. So I'm gonna give them a B because of the improvement. I know Devondre kind of brings him down a little bit, but he's still a veteran voice, and I think you know he still had a purpose on the team, and I think he's still helping a guy like Quay and Isaiah mature. So I'm gonna give him a B.
That's a good grade. I've been going back between like B minus C plus, like in that territory.
I
Like I think Quay Walker really took a step forward. I'm like you. I kind of wish, and this new defensive coordinator, I kind of hope that they leverage his athleticism a little more. Because a few games where they did make a point to blitz him or move him around a little bit, I thought it made a big difference, and I think that there's something to be had there, and they should look into it more. I don't think Devondre played healthy the entire year. I think he was hurt to some degree, no matter what he was doing. So it definitely felt like he was never 100%. And I really like what McDuffie brings, but he's got to stay in the field. Every time like Campbell would go down, McDuffie would come in and he'd get hurt, or, he would concussion or whatever it was going to be. So I'm really hoping that he has a more healthy 2024 season, because I think they got something there. But this is another position I'm definitely looking to add to in the offseason. I don't know if Drake comes back. I feel like if he comes back, it's on a reworked, cheaper deal, but it feels like the return there on what they're investing at this point isn't what they need. And I just think you need someone who's as athletic as Quay next to him, because teams are too smart now, man. The slot position, doing crosses over the middle, the way that they're exploiting tight ends up the seams, like you got to have athleticism there. And Campbell just feels a little bit like he's more of an old school linebacker, and it's not necessarily an old school league right now.
All right, edge rushers. I'm going to be pretty harsh here, and I'm going to give him a C minus. I'm happy that Gary got the deal. I think he's deserving of the deal because he is the guy's work ethic, his loyalty to the team, the nasty in him, the dog in him. I do believe he has that, but the guy just goes completely like silent, in games. You don't hear from him. Where was the edge rush against the 49ers? Hell, even in that Cowboy game, I really do feel like it was more like, it felt like Dak was really beating their team more so than our defense. I know they played well. I'm not trying to say like the defense didn't play well, but there's just too many times these edge rushers just went completely silent, and I'm just still not really sold on the fact that we can get home enough. I know they probably, I'm sure the pass rush rate is probably decent, but like I don't think they're affecting the game as well as they should for how much they're getting paid. And Preston also getting a lot of money. I think the nice thing I love about Preston is that at least he's available. He doesn't get hurt. I love the Iron Man in him, and he is a voice as well. And I hope Brenton Cox and Lucas Van Ness really can, and Barry, who was a nice story. I think he obviously elevated this season, which is nice. So maybe I could go up to a C or C plus to kind of just say the improvement from the young guys stepped up, obviously, but overall performance, I do feel like I don't know, it wasn't enough for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I was going to say like a C minus C myself, and a lot of it is because I think that Rashawn Gary underperformed. I know he was coming back from an ACL, and I think that we were willing to give that a pass for a bit, because he had a slow start and they obviously had him on a pitch count. But when you really needed that down the stretch, let's look at the last month and a half of the season. He was really, wasn't getting home. Like, I understand he's, okay, so he's got a higher pressure rate, but it's like, how many like game sealing or changing sacks did they just never get? Like, they never got him. I'm really
you see what Aiden Hutchinson does, right? Like,
yeah,
see how he affects the game. I don't always get that from Gary.
I don't get it a lot, and I think that he's handsomely paid, but like people try to lump him into this like elite pass rusher category. I don't think he is. I think he has room to grow there yet, or I think he has more to
Yeah.
prove there. I think when he has a big game, he has a big game, but he doesn't do it consistently. He's not showing up every game, and I know there's some hidden stats in the that don't show up, but like I feel like for what he's getting paid, like we need more out of that. Like Preston Smith is a solid player and he's always available, but he's no longer like this just like menace as a pass rusher. I like Enigbari, but his 2024 is screwed because he tore his ACL
Yeah,
so
right.
late
He's
in the year. I
gone for
mean,
the year.
so he's pretty much toast next year. So you can count him out. And then so it's going to be a lot on Van Ness to take a huge step forward.
Absolutely.
And I think he's going to be on the Gary trajectory, but it's like you're going to have to get him producing right away. And this is the third straight position group that I'm going to say this, but I think they're going to have to maybe look at
again.
I don't know if it's a first round or second round, but some more depth there for sure.
Shocker, using the first round pick on the defense. Imagine
Yeah, embrace it.
Let's move on here. I'm trying to grab the. Oops, there we go. So
D-line.
D-line, man. I have this as A minus B plus. Honestly, I think this group is what really kept this like defense really at bay. I don't remember too many running backs going buck wild on us this season, which was a huge step from last year.
Yeah.
And the improvement from Devontae Wyatt was nice. Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden are game wreckers in the future. I think they have a lot of promise. TJ Slayton was solid, and Kenny Clark, man, you can't say enough about Kenny Clark. That guy, I know he has a fat like tag on him right now. Maybe we restructure that, or sorry, maybe we re-sign him to an extension, because the guy, I think he needs to be a Packer, for a long time. I think he's kind of like that Aaron Jones. Like he is that guy on the defense to me. I think he is just that rock. He had some couple, like, I feel like one penalty a game where you're just like, what are you doing? And you're kind of like, I always said that every single game he gets one penalty, and I like to see that get cleaned up a little bit because he is a vet. But yeah, he's as Nick was saying, I think he's definitely the MVP on this defense. So I give him a A minus B plus.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say B or B plus. I'll go B plus. I feel like this group was the strength of the defense the entire year. I think they had a couple of unsung heroes. Like Kenny Clark gets the most notoriety for good reason. He had a career high in sacks, I believe, and he feels like he makes a couple of plays every game. He rarely goes long stretches of time without doing something, so like I feel like he's a pretty consistent player and he's the bedrock of that defense. I really like what Devontae Wyatt did. He had a sneaky good year. He had I think 6 or 7 sacks. Like I think that Kenny Clark finally has a couple of running mates next to him. Now, no longer are we looking at Dean Lowry and whoever else was eating those spots up. But like I like what Slayton does. I think he brings the tenacity. He's always shouting and getting people juiced up on the field. And Carl Brooks, man, I really feel like they need to work him more into the rotation next year.
100%.
It'll be hard if Slayton and Wyatt are playing the way they are. But I think this new D coordinator, one of the criteria has to be like, can you leverage the talent that you guys have? Because the Packers have a lot of talent and a lot of athleticism on their defense. I just think they got to get it and bring it out maybe in different ways. So this is a group that I'm really looking forward to, because you're bringing pretty much everybody back next year, I think. And I think another year older, another year wiser, and they're just going to be that much better. If they can pair that with much better play from their counterparts on the outside linebacker group, like this could be a really good front unit. But it's going to be dependent on Gary and company to kind of match the intensity of those defensive linemen.
All right. Offensive line. I'm going to give this group an A. Honestly, you lose your star left tackle. Not sure if we're going to see him in a Packer uniform again, honestly, but you ended the season with a guy in Rasheed Walker, a 7th-round pick, I'm pretty sure, and being like a solid left tackle. Is he the greatest? He has room to grow, obviously, and Zach Tom might be the new Elton Jenkins, being able to play so many different spots, and obviously just solidifying a role in year 2, and just basically taking the job from Josh Nijman. And I think the one thing that is kind of like upsetting is the Josh Myers story. Like, is he is he too inconsistent? Do you need to go look at a center in the in the off season? You know, is John Runyon going to be retained because he's a free agent? You know, you wish he kind of would have kind of solidified that right guard position, because now Sean Ryan seems to be kind of like stealing that spotlight, which is good for him too. That's another draft pick that you use that obviously is, you know, earning the playtime. So you did this little like musical chairs with those two, and you know, I don't, and obviously Elton was, you know, surefire as he always is, but not the question remains is, do you lose Bakhtiari? Do you lose Josh Nyman? Do you lose Caleb Jones, who's also a free agent going into the draft? Because now that means, like, yes, you might have your starting five, but you don't have any depth, and that's kind of where you need to. That's the one position I think it doesn't hurt to have too much depth. And Royce Newman has to go, so I hope he does. But yeah, I'm going to give him an A.
I'm with you. I'm going to go an A as well, and it's because of the adversity they face. I mean, very clearly they were counting on David Bakhtiari to be their left tackle for most of the season, and they kind of had to scramble once everything went awry after the first game in Chicago. And obviously they weren't really ready to get Rashid going, but he kind of had to go through some growing pains. But let's look at let's just say the last half, kind of after that Oakland game where Max Crosby had his way with the offensive line.
That's true.
After that point, I mean, we played several teams with elite pass rushers. I mean, down the stretch, it was the Chiefs, the Lions, you know, the Cowboys, obviously in the playoffs, you know, Vikings had Daniil Hunter, you know, the Niners in the playoffs. Like all those games, they pretty much kept Jordan Love clean, and you never really. I mean, let's just look at the two playoff games. Micah Parsons was a non-factor, and so was DeMarcus Lawrence. Neither one of them did shit against the Packers offense line. They held up wonderfully. And against the Niners, they did the same thing. They handled Bosa and Chase Young. Neither one of those guys really had a huge impact on the game. Part of that was, you know, great scheming by Matt LaFleur to get it away from those guys, but the other part of it was the offensive line was stout. So I feel like the Packers have to feel really good about this unit. I think your point about the depth is very true. We've always had, you know, you can go into your bag and have 3 or 4 other guys you can kind of pull up and mix and match. You know, they're going to be a little bit tight there, but I think the fact that Walker and Tom have looked so good at left and right tackle, maybe it takes some of the pressure off the draft early. You can look at, you know, mid rounds, they've had a lot of success, and maybe you find a savvy vet to bring off the street, something like that. But I'm with you, man. I think that this group overachieved, and I expect them to do it again next year. And I'm going with that solid A.
Good. I'm going to move on to the tight ends next. I'm going to give them an A, and they might be an A plus if they didn't have Josiah DeGuara on their roster. So just kidding. I mean, he still sucks, but I do think this group, outside of just maybe staying a little bit healthier, I mean, obviously a lacerated kidney, you can't control that, but you know, getting hit in the balls and getting taken out, or, you know, like I hope they're a little bit smarter with their bodies, obviously, but if they can stay healthy for, you know, at least 13 to 14 games a season, I mean, this like basically the Bash Brothers, basically, you want to call them. And, you know, I think actually, you know, Ben Simmons might have a say in this too, of trying to be retained. But Tyler Davis goes out right away in the beginning of the year, torn ACL. It was kind of nice that I'm not trying to, like, you know, root for a guy's injury, but it was nice that there was so much talk about him being such a coach's guy, and they really like this guy, and that's why they retained him. And I'm like, maybe you don't see a Tucker or a Luke
dropping
Musgrave
passes in preseason.
Right. Maybe you
remember bitching about that.
Right. If he's taking snaps, maybe we don't get to see him, and I'm kind of glad that they kind of worked that way, because now you fully saw what you can have in these rookies, and that should be your focal point going into the offseason and training camp. How do we get these guys in 12 personnel? How do we get more looks for them? They should be the ones kind of dictating the game outside of Aaron Jones, because that's going to make, you know, the wide receivers get open, and, you know, obviously the passing game will, you know, open up down the field more. So I'm going to go A with the tight ends.
Yeah, I'm going to say B plus just because I don't want to keep handing out A's, because I feel like I'm going to hand out more A's in the offense. But really, your argument for the A is right there. It's spot on. And the reason why the reason why we want to give them high grades is this was probably one of the biggest question mark groups coming into the season. Like they obviously invested draft capital there, and they expected a lot. But, you know, tight end's a hard position to kind of acclimate to, especially as a rookie. And over the course of the season, I think you saw, obviously Musgrave was the hot hand early on, but his spleen injury was kind of, I don't want, in the same light you just said it, almost a blessing in disguise, because I think it made Tucker Kraft have to grow up, and it made the Packers have to utilize him more.
100%.
And I think if Musgrave doesn't go out, I don't know that you discover that or see enough of it.
Injuries kind of made everybody kind of get that little notch up,
And they talk about next man up all the time, and I think that was so true here. And so going forward, man, I mean, you have two really talented tight ends, both of which can run and catch, both of which look to be long-term Packers. And he kind of got a little bit of razzle dazzle, ground and pound. You have like Musgrave, who could be that kind of like vertical threat tight end, and then you got Tucker Kraft, which kind of feels like more of an old school tight end. You can put him on the line, he'll block and get scrappy, kind of like a Kittle in a way, but then he can go out and catch a pass and make a guy miss and throw a stiff arm. So, I do think that Ben Sims, they should try to bring him back. I think they have a little bit something there. I think that DeGuara is gone. I don't really see what his place is in the team anymore. When I was watching that Aaron Jones run, he was like just running out in front of him, like, well, just go block somebody, dude. So, but I feel really good about that position group, and I'm excited to see LaFleur kind of, during the offseason develop it more and get it more involved in the game plan, because I think you saw just them scratching the surface.
Wide receivers, I'm not going to give him an A.
We already know.
I don't want to give too many A's apparently, so I'm going to give him a B plus.
Okay.
Really, really nice that all these guys like stepped up when they needed to, right? Like you lose a Christian Watson for the majority of the season. Jaden Reed gets out a couple games. Romeo kind of goes silent for a stretch there, and you got guys like Malik Heath and Dontavian Wicks, and obviously your guy Bo Melton, that make a big contributions. Actually, the funny thing is, I thought Grant DeBose was going to be like the guy coming out, like everybody was talking about him in camp, and then you look at Dontavian Wicks that ends up being the guy. It's so cool to see a group like this, flourish. And I'll let you. This is your group here, so I'll let you take it away.
Oh, dude, they're getting an A. They're getting an A for me because, I mean, I know I just said maybe the tight end group was the biggest question mark. I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the receiver group definitely was, because it was your veterans are year two guys. Those are your veterans on the team, and even those guys were a bit unproven going into it. So, but at the end of the season, now it's like you got Wicks, who looks like he's going to be a keeper. Jaden Reed looks like he's going to be a dominant Packer for the next decade. I love what Romeo Doubs brings to the game. I think that, is he going to be a week in and week out dominant receiver? No, but clearly when he has his games and his number is called, he's stepped up. And I really, really, really hope that Christian Watson can kind of get to the bottom of the hamstring stuff, because obviously when he's in the game and he's healthy, that's a different offense. They do different things, and they're more explosive than they already are. You go down to guys like Malik Heath and Bo Melton. I mean, you're getting production out of guys that, probably don't crack. That probably don't crack a starting roster on most of the other teams in the league. So to go from this point last year where we were thinking, what the hell are they going to do? What are they going to do at wide receiver? Like, oh my God, they're totally screwed.
They didn't grab Jackson Smith and Jake Bud.
to flash forward a year and to kind of go, you know what? Like, I don't really want them to add anybody. I kind of want them just to run it back with what they have. And as someone just said, it's a quick, fast, shifty group that has variant of size. You got tall guys, you got shorter guys. They kind of fit and check many different boxes, which I think is why they're so dangerous. Absolutely. And I think LaFleur really, as the season went on, he learned what he had in each one of those guys and was able to kind of leverage their skill sets as they go on. So again, as I said, for the tight end group, I'm so stoked to see LaFleur scheme up stuff for these guys, because I think he can get really creative with that cast of wide receivers and his young tight ends.
All right, real quick, running backs, I will go B, only because they can't stay healthy. That's my only concern, is that you lost Aaron Jones in the first half of the year for the most of it. And then, then he gets back and he has obviously the big tear. Like, obviously, Aaron Jones should be a forever Packer. They should figure out his contract and kind of restructure it. I'm sure he'll take a pay cut, because he always does. But then AJ Dillon gets hurt, and then he goes out, and it's like, he kind of carried the load a little bit, but then it's like when they were playing together, it almost felt like Matt LaFleur, like, like didn't know how to use his running backs properly, and then you're giving too many snaps to Dylan and not enough to Aaron Jones. So I hope he figures that out for the next season. Now that he's seen a guy that can just go 5 straight games or 4 straight games of 100 yards or whatever. So I'm going to give him a solid B. Just, and that's not in any disrespect of what Aaron Jones did at the later part of the season. That's just overall. So.
Yeah, I'm going B-, and I think Aaron Jones is the reason it's not a C. I feel like I know Dylan was hurt the last month, and like the tight ends, Dylan's injury sort of forced LaFleur to have to just lean on Aaron Jones,
Right.
and hopefully he proved him something. And going into next year, they do some more of that. AJ Dillon had a couple of decent games, but I really was underwhelmed by him when he played, particularly when Aaron Jones was out. He was featured. And I think I really can't think of a game that he wowed me in. Like he may have had some runs here and there, but I really thought that coming into this year, knowing that he needed to really produce to help this offense stay afloat, particularly with so much unknown, I didn't really particularly care for what he brought to the table. I'm never impressed by Patrick Taylor. I just think he's the epitome of a jag. I just like he's whatever, dude. Okay, you're here. And then Emmanuel Wilson was kind of failure to launch. Like he had a great preseason, then he got that injury, early on, and just kind of never picked up any steam after that.
Yeah, so my hope, a couple of areas in San Francisco.
He did. So my hope going forward is that whether or not they bring AJ Dillon back, I think they do need to add another running back, probably in the draft. I don't know what the draft process
is. It Braylon Allen? Is it?
To me, you need to get someone as explosive, if not
Michigan
more explosive than Aaron Jones. You don't need a big bruiser. Like I just think the offensive line, like their best talent isn't run blocking. Like they're a good pass blocking group. So I think you need a little extra speed to get through there and maybe get through some of these, closing gaps quickly. And Dylan just isn't set up to do that in this offense. And I think that Jones, that type is. So B- for me. But I have some hope going forward.
Quarterback. Here we go. I'm going to give him a C+.
QB,
C+. Hey. Hear me out.
I can't
hear me out. I knew it. See, I was going to shock the world.
You did.
Jordan Love played like ass. Let's not forget about this. For a good month, almost a month and a week, actually. And yes, did he turn it around? He did. But then what does he do at the very last moment? Reverts back to ass Jordan Love and throws dumb throws for the last 2 possessions, and then obviously the final pick in the final minute there in a what are you doing kind of moment. And that to me was a little alarming. Again, very happy with his season. He is the guy, not questioning that. He's answered so many questions, but the decision making, that to me is also going to be the thing that they hopefully you have to build on something, right? These are grades. So obviously if I give him a low grade, he has nothing but, room for growth. I get it. Being the youngest team, being a first year starter, it should already get him to a B regardless, but you can't like not forget about what happened and what what kind of happened at the end of the game of the 49ers either. So I'm going to be a little bit harsh on this. I said C+, B-. All right. How about that? I'll even say it's like one of those like half and tweener grades. What about you?
I can't believe you gave him a C+. I mean, my God, they're tough grader over here. My goodness. I'm going A-. Like I feel like how is that a wow? The reason the Packers made the playoffs is because Jordan Love went unconscious for the last 2 months. He was the best QB in football down the stretch. I get it. He threw
16 games, brother. 17 games.
He threw a gnarly interception at the end of the Niners game. Like I get it. Like,
gnarly. It wasn't great. Suicide. That's quarterback 101. Do not throw across the body in the freaking rain.
I agree. It wasn't great, but you know what? If we all sat here and someone had a genie and he asked to know what Jordan Love's stat line looked like in before the season started, someone told you he's going to throw 32 touchdowns to 11 interceptions and almost 4,200 yards. I mean, are you kidding me? You would have sold your soul
Jordan
for
would
that.
Give himself? What do you think Jordan would give himself?
Well, he'd probably be more critical. He'd probably give himself a B. But he's not giving himself a C+.
See, you're just thinking with your heart. You're just like, oh yeah, Jordan Love. I'm gonna
my eyeballs.
jump in the bandwagon finally after 10 weeks. Like,
and he's doing it with literal first and second year guys. That's it.
Again, I
No
completely agree.
vets to lean on. To me, it was a superb job. He deserves a name higher.
He still had games, man. He had the Giants game. He had the Raiders game. He had the Bronco game. He had the Vikings
no
game.
doubt.
He had the it's just
middle of the year was not great for him for about a month, but after that, like
Falcon game,
like,
he went.
he was great. He was
All
great
right.
for 3/4 in that game.
Sean Clifford, shout out Sean Clifford, best backup in the world. I'm sure Alex will love that. Alex Denner. All right, that's it for the grades. We'll brush through quickly here before we close out the show with the coaching candidates. I think friend of the show, Peter Bukowski, said it the best. And you saw the title of the show today, Find the Coach, Not the Scheme. I do think that is exactly the perfect line that I hope, LaFleur goes into it, because in the end, like you said earlier, I think there's a lot of talent on this defense. I think there's a lot of promise, and that it's just a matter of how can you get this, how can you get this like group to fall in line, but also believe what you're preaching? Because Joe Barry tried for 3 years and it didn't really didn't really work. He lost that locker room, probably lost a star player. So what do you do, as a defensive coordinator with this, ragtag of, misfits that just need a good leader, right? So I have, first off, we'll just start off with a familiar face, Brandon Staley. Had an awful year with the Chargers. Maybe an awful stint with the Chargers.
Plural.
Maybe sometimes you got to think maybe it's you're a coordinator, not a coach kind of mentality, because he might be just best suited as that. Obviously there was interest. They already brought him in for an interview, but then now I think he's over there interviewing back with the Rams. So your thoughts on Staley? I mean, we can be kind of quick about this too if you wanted to say yay, nay, or if you have a couple. All right, I'm a pass too. I will too. Aubrey Pleasant. Now he hasn't officially taken an interview yet, but there was obviously some interest from the Detroit Lions. But he was also a former Packer, actually, former Packer coach. So thoughts on Aubrey?
I mean, I don't know a ton about him, but I feel like he may have that kind of spunk they need. So I would be interested. He seems like he's well respected.
My only thought is, like, how much is that Aaron Glenn? Because he's the pass game coordinator for the Detroit Lions, and Aaron Glenn is the DC, I think. So
I don't think he'd be my first pick, though.
Okay. Let's go to Wink. Wink Martindale obviously had some good years with the Ravens, then with the Buffalo Bills, and now he had one good year with the Giants, and then he just hasn't really had the talent either. So how are you feeling about Wink?
I go back and forth. I feel like he's the kind of defensive coordinator where he requires specific type of players to pull off his scheme. He is blitz heavy, a lot of zero. What do they call it? Zero blitzes or cover zero, just going in at them. So I don't know, man. I don't have a lot of like love right now for our ability to rush the passer. Like I think we have guys there, but they got to bring more out of them. I don't know if it's the right time for Wink, although I think like his aggressive style, like that like energy and that type of defense is what we want to look at. I don't know if he's the right guy right now, but if they went with him, I don't think I would. I think it'd be fine with it.
So the next guy, I'm still weird about this one, but Aiden Nerd, British guy, I think, or Australian, one of the two. But a Cowboy guy, obviously coaching up on the D line, but also just he's had DeMarcus Lawrence. He's had a hand in with Lawrence, right? But how are you feeling about him?
I'm probably a pass there. If I'm going after a Cowboy, I wanted Al Harris, who doesn't seem to get mentioned anywhere.
I was gonna tie him with Al Harris, cornerback or DB's coach. Do you bring him home? They kind of look suspect against the Packers.
Well, that's the thing.
The Cowboys didn't play well against good teams. Look at Miami. Look at some of their other big losses. San Francisco got blitzed by San Francisco. So how much is it on him? I don't know.
I love Al's energy. He was one of my all-time favorite Packers. Like I loved him when he was here. So like I feel like he has that like I don't know, that right type of personality, kind of bringing
But I
out
don't
the
need the
young
guy
about the
though. I
young
don't need
guys.
the guy that I fell in love with when he wore 31.
Yeah.
I need the guy that's going to coach at my D, so I don't have to
Yep.
freaking have them giving up 30 points a game. Like
And
that's what I need.
I think he's got
Don't
some
get too
proving
much
to do yet.
nostalgic.
Yeah.
Right?
But
I don't
I'm
want
gonna
to get too
pass on the other dude.
Aiden, you're off. Okay.
Yeah, I'm off.
The potential. I know this is kind of a. He hasn't officially got an interview, but he was potentially going to have interest. Slash, he definitely interviewed the last session, and there was a PR nightmare apparently, and he didn't want to come here, and we did offer him the job. A lot of weird stuff happened there with Jim Leonard, but guy can coach though. I mean, Jimmy Leonard had a top 10 defense. He actually was number 1 in 2017 with his defense. 2021, he was also first ranked defense in college football. Like that's a lot of teams to have, number 1 ranked team. So with college kids, mind you.
Well, and he did so with like 3-star guys. It wasn't like 4 or 5-star recruits. Like he never had like the cream of the crop. So he always sort of turned water to wine, if you will. I'd be interested in
Comes
him.
from
I
the
mean,
patent tree.
Well, it comes from the Patton Rex Ryan tree. Like I feel like I like that style. I think it's a little bit a good switch up from the whatever we're coming from. The fill me in here. What defense you're running here? The guy what's
3-4.
Well,
Vic Fangio.
Vic Fangio. Thank you.
Right.
I kept wanting to say Vance Joseph. No, Vic Fangio.
Same thing though.
I'd be open to, but I don't know, man. I think
Are
burned
you
the
out?
Packers
Are
once.
you in or out?
I'm in on it, but I don't know if the Packers are gonna be in on it.
I'm in on it too, but I'm hesitant. Denard Wilson, DB's coach.
I'm in
for
on
the
this
Ravens.
guy.
I'm 1000% in on this guy.
Yep.
The Ravens
Anybody
defense just
from
didn't
the
get that
Ravens.
way for a reason.
I feel like certain teams understand who is good at coaching defense, and the Ravens are one of them. And that's a team I would go pluck people off of and give him a shot at defensive coordinator for sure. And he's one. People love him, and I'd be all about it. Him too.
Zach Orr is obviously a linebackers coach, obviously a pastime linebacker as well. Very young. So I just a little concerned with him just because he maybe doesn't have the experience yet. And they just piss out great linebackers in Baltimore. So I'm not saying that to taking away anything that he's done, but I'd like Denard Wilson, who's actually had some time in other spots. But finally, Christian Parker, DB's coach for Denver. A lot of hype around him right now. A lot of hype.
I'm buying that too.
I will. He would be my number 2 candidate. Right now, I got Denard Wilson, Christian Parker, maybe Zach, or maybe
those are my 3.
Jim Leonard. That's kind of like my hierarchy, I guess. And then
Ejiro,
which I don't think he's going to get available.
I don't think he's either.
But maybe as a very dark horse, Wink Martindale, just based on like success
Ability,
and like like experience, exactly. So. But yeah, Christian Parker is a high name that people are really loving right now too. And some guys I didn't mention, Chris Hewitt, Ravens passing game coordinator, same thing. You're just plucking, from basically
the Niners. We'll just keep taking the DC every year.
Former Packer Johnny Holland, linebacker coach for the 49ers, could be an interesting, very old kind of guy, but still has command of the locker room. And your thoughts, and I will end with this because I know we're kind of going over our showtime here. Bill Belichick. Still hasn't gotten a job yet. Still hasn't gotten a job yet.
Convince him to like, hey man, you know what? I don't think you're ever going to get a head coaching gig again, or at least not one that's going to be worth your while. Why don't you just come? You got 6 rings. Why don't you come to another historic organization, the Packers?
He does like his history here with the Packers. So I'm out on Bill only because if Matt LaFleur somehow has some sort of like weird like issue and maybe the team doesn't exactly, you're gonna have that all throughout like the media, like just Bill need to be the next guy. Like, do they fire him and then you have an interim? Oh wait, it's a Super Bowl winning guy. Like that stuff to me.
Thanks, Anthony.
Just is just awful. I hate that kind of noise. We already got rid of the noise, and that was Aaron Rodgers. So I'm kind of away from that, but you never know. Thank you guys so much. We kind of went over a little bit, but I wanted to get on here with you guys before we kind of take a little hiatus. Like Fred and Matt said last week, we will probably have Reese's Senior Bowl. You're gonna have the Scout what am I trying to say? The combine. Sorry.
Combine, yeah.
And then
Be back on like free agent time.
Yes, free agency time, and then obviously, yes, we will for sure be back on the draft. But yeah, I think you'll probably see us back in March. So again, really appreciate everybody that was with us all season long. It's still wild that you guys, keep coming back for more, and keep listening to three knuckleheads, talk some ball. So really appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoy the Super Bowl. Like I said, enjoy this next week, even though we're not in it. It's still football. It's the last we're going to see for a little bit, so you might as well soak it in until you got like 7 months of nothing, and then you're in June and July. You're like, I want to just get to football, and you're like,
playing Madden and trying to get a fix.
Exactly. Matt, anything from you for the last couple sessions here?
No, just to reiterate what we said last week, like thank everybody for stopping by throughout the year. It was a really fun year to follow along with everybody. Love the interactions and the banter and the chats and shooting us questions. And, it makes it a lot more fun to sit up here and talk when you guys are chiming in. So appreciate that again. Hopefully you guys stick around. We'll figure out some stuff here in the off season. And before you know it, it's going to be a training camp.
Absolutely. And all you need is love. And that's hopefully next year I can give him a better grade. But
you better C+. You better C+. Come on now.
With that being said, that's Matt. I'm Sanjay. And as always, and thank you so much. Go Pack. Go.